Awesome. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for coming today. I'm so excited to share all the details about my trip with everyone. If you've been coming to chair exercise class, you know that I've been telling stories and making a travel theme workout for us. So we've been packing our bags, we've been carrying our suitcases, we've been doing all the things. And I want to share a few more details with you. I thought I'd have some pictures. Just to fill you in on all of the joys that my dad and I got to share together on our trip. So we started in Chicago. We met for lunch in Rockford so that I then drove us to Chicago. My dad and mom didn't have to drive into O'Hare. But as soon as we made it through the security gate in O'Hare, we stumbled onto this wonderful wall of gratitude. My dad left a note for his dog. But we actually left not lots of notes. Grateful for the chance to travel together, grateful for a safe flight, grateful for our family who stayed behind, including our dogs. And that was just a really nice way to start our trip with a moment of gratitude. We did have to spend about 4 hours in the Chicago airport, but since my dad has never really flown internationally, we spent our time, we got some snacks for the trip, we bought little travel neck pillows, we had plenty of things to do to keep us busy. And then we took off to Copenhagen. And so the first thing we did in Copenhagen, we took the train from the airport to our place, our hotel that we stayed in. And where we stayed, we were only about a block away from this place called Tivoli Gardens. And this is the oldest amusement park in the world. And actually, Walt Disney visited this park in the 50s, and it was his inspiration to make Disneyland. So a very cool place. We didn't ride any rides, but they did have a Christmas market going on. So we paid our entry. We just went and we walked the Christmas booths. And then one of the very first things we saw was this lovely Santa dressed windmill. And this was a big reason why I chose a trip with my dad, because what I never got to do as an athlete that I always wished I would have done, I never got to go to Europe on a bike camp. That's very common in the sport of speed skating. You'll do 2 to 10 day biking camps where all you do is go out and ride 50 to 100 miles every day. All the same energy systems are used in cycling like speed skating, all the same muscle groups. So especially during the off season or like right after a big competition, teams will take a bike camp. And I got invited to go with several teams over the years, but my coach at the time always wanted me to stay with my team in the United States. And so that was one thing I really felt like, gosh, I really wish I'd said yes when I had that chance. So when I got the opportunity to travel, the first thing I did was I knew that flying to Poland, our layover would be in Copenhagen. So I decided to see if I could find any Dutch windmills in Copenhagen, because specifically it was the Dutch team that would invite me on their bike camps, and they go to amazing places. They go to Mallorca, Spain every year to do a bike camp. So like I missed out on some really cool stuff with that team. But what I wanted to do to kind of replace that opportunity was find a Dutch windmill in Copenhagen. So this was our first day. We just went and walked and we stumbled upon this beautiful Santa-themed windmill. But the next day, we rented bikes. And the first thing we noticed on our bikes was all of the unique architecture and just the way that they would build their buildings in a way that we don't see them here. Whether that's a historical home or the houses along the canal, or even just like office buildings and apartment buildings. The way they do things there is quite different from us. Something I shared with my dad ongoingly throughout the trip. One of my favorite things about traveling is I love to see how people are mostly the same everywhere you go. We all build buildings, just some look like this and some look like that. We all put our own little flair on it, even throughout the trip. There's a lot of similarities throughout Europe, especially in architecture, but you could see the flourishes on the siding were different in Denmark than the gutters had this weird little decoration. In Poland and in Germany, all the rooftops have this very specific point with a little flourish on top. And so everyone's just making buildings, but we all make them our own unique way. And that's what I love about traveling, is that we all have schools, we all have banks, we all go to church, we all go to work, we all have to commute. Human beings do this all around the world. It's just that every country you go to, or even every state sometimes, has their own unique way. So that was very fun to share that with my dad. Probably the biggest kick that he got out of the trip is that here in the States, you flip the light switches up to turn the lights on. Over there, you flip the light switch down for the lights to turn on. I don't know why he noticed that, but that was one of the very first things he noticed on our trip. So in addition to all the architecture, we rode our bikes all around. We went to this pretty well-known place called Nyhavn, which means new harbor. At this point, I don't think it's used for any real trade, but it's mostly a touristy spot. Fun fact, Hans Christian Andersen lived on this street for a number of years. And then we found this just lovely anchor. That's just a picture of us. I'm sure that anchor has, no, I looked it up. I know this historical value. The memorial anchor commemorates 1,700 Danish soldiers that died in World War II. So that anchor there where we took our picture was a historic memorial spot. So we walked all up and down, and we also made it pretty far north in the town of Copenhagen. We went to this place called the Little Mermaid. And so Hans Christian Andersen lived in lived in Copenhagen for several years. I am not entirely sure if he based the story, The Little Mermaid, on this statue, or if the statue was built to commemorate him and his excellent storytelling. In the middle there, we have St. Albans Church, and that was a church specifically for the English that were coming over and wanted an English-speaking church rather than a Danish-speaking church. So these are all kind of in a similar part of town, and you have to go through this big gate to get into a park where all these things are. And at the top of that gate here on the right is King Neptune. And the reason that stands out for me was because Copenhagen and Gdansk, where I went in Poland, both had statues of King Neptune. So they were both sea-loving people who did a lot of their trade on the water. And I personally always enjoy, like I said, how we see those things that unify us. Danish people are different from Polish people, but they both have a King Neptune right in their downtown city square. So that just really amazed me to see how similar these places are when you do get to travel. We went out to eat, and my dad was so impressed with the Danish cuisine. Specifically, he shared with me, this is how my mom used to cook. So it's very nostalgic for him, specifically the gravy. They like home make their gravy there, and he could really notice a difference. Maybe you do this, maybe you don't, but I make gravy in packets. That's not how you're supposed to do it. And so everywhere we went in Europe where we had an opportunity to have, he had pork chops with gravy, mashed potatoes with gravy, whatever it was, he always noticed how homemade and authentic those recipes were. And it was a real gift for me to get to share food with my dad that reminded him of him growing up. And then obviously he got to share those stories with me, what that was like to grow up on a farm. I learned that my dad was, I knew this, but I learned more details. My dad was actually born in the kitchen while my grandpa was out milking cows. And my grandpa came in and he had a baby boy. So these are the types of things that I got to learn spending 2 weeks on the road with my dad. Now, one of the things we just so happened to come across on our bike ride, we found this place called Palace Square. It's where all their government buildings come around, and they say square, but it's a circle. It's really more of a courtyard. But all of their parliamentary buildings are around this circle, and they do a changing of the guard. So they weren't quite like the ones in England that are all stiff like this. They can scratch their noses and things like that, but they were very official, very authoritative, and we just so happened to wander across this place at the exact moment of the changing of the guard. So not only did we get to see that whole process, but because the king was in residence, there was also a marching band. That was so special for us to not really even know we were stumbling onto something, and then to stumble upon something that was very entertaining, historical, and also extremely unique. Eventually, we made it all the way up to Castellet, which is where the Dutch windmill was. And this is the windmill that I wanted to see on the trip. Technically, it is still in working order. So Castellet is a military base. It's still, I think it's mostly just used for meetings. I don't think it's used as an active military spot, but it is still used by the Denmark Ministry of Defense as an active military defense place. So as we were walking around, what was neat, if you look here on the lower right, they dug out that moat. They used all the dirt from the moat and they made a mound all around. I think it's shaped like a pentagon, which just occurred to me now how interesting that our defense building is a pentagon, and I went to a defense place in Denmark and it was a pentagon. We all do things the same. Isn't that neat? That's my favorite part. So they dug out this moat, they made a big wall out of all the dirt, and then down in the center is where they would hide the cannons, so they could fire at the enemy without being exposed to any return fire. This building here is just an officer's barracks up on the top right, and then here again is that Dutch windmill. Something I learned, maybe it's just my millennial brain, I thought windmills were for power, for storing wind power. This windmill was made to mill grain into flour, and I didn't realize that historically windmills had a different purpose than what we use them for now. So even though this wasn't, I wouldn't say like the shiniest part of our trip, it was the most fun because we got to take our bikes a fair way out of town, and again, just learn about the history of the place that we were in. After that, we took a bike ride into a more residential part of town, and this is something very unique. We noticed it in Copenhagen, but it's also like this in Amsterdam. People will just live on their houseboats. So next time I go anywhere in Europe with a houseboat culture, I'll definitely be trying to rent a houseboat to stay on, because they just look so lovely and peaceful. And while we were riding around, we made it to this restaurant that had a sauna. Now, in Scandinavian culture, saunas are for your health. And actually, you can do a sauna to increase your body temperature, and that's good for your health, but you can also hop in the canal. And the cold temperatures are good for your health. So the reason we picked this place out, first of all, they give you a discount on food if you use the sauna. So that seems like a no-brainer. And then you can see, I hope you can see how there's a little dock kind of around there. So this is the view from inside the sauna. One side was fully a window. And just the time we got there, we were lucky, we got to see the sunset. And then there's this swimming dock that's built all around, but the water is canal water. So you're literally swimming in the ocean, even though you're in a small little safe walled off place. So I contrasted a couple times because that's good for you. And I learned about the Scandinavian culture that they've been using saunas for 10,000 years. And even in North America, before you could put an electric sauna in, this was common for Native Americans in North America as well as Europeans in Europe. They would make more of what's considered a lodge. So the idea was that it was a poor man's pharmacy, and you could cure a lot of your health problems by exposing your body to extreme hot temperatures and extreme cold temperatures. Just so you know, you can do this at home. You can turn your shower on hot for 2 to 3 minutes, turn it on cold for 2 to 3 minutes. And alternating back and forth between those extreme temperatures, it does 2 things for you. First of all, it challenges your body to come back into balance. You purposefully push it out of balance, and then your body practices coming back into balance. So think about you're traveling for holidays and there's traffic and you're stressed. We get out of balance all the time. So practicing getting out of balance and giving your body repetitions to come back into balance, that's how it helps us physically, but also mentally and emotionally. When you're really hot or really cold, you start to breathe like this. and it's really shallow and really tense and really tight. And you know, when we get stressed, that's the same thing we do. We start to breathe shallow, we carry our tension in our shoulders. So not just physically for homeostasis and relaxation, but also mentally and emotionally to practice taking a deep breath, calming your anxious, racing thoughts. When you're in an uncomfortable environment that you can control, you can turn your shower off anytime. But you can also choose to stay in it and take a deep breath and practice a more positive way, mentally and emotionally, of dealing with physical stress. So I do this, oh no. So I do this a lot, even when I'm here in the United States. I try to sauna or do what's considered a lodge about once a month. It has those physiological benefits, but also spiritually, this is something I learned while I was there. The idea is that you can use your sweat as a sacrifice, and your willingness to be uncomfortable can be your sacrifice. And in the same way the stones can lift the steam of a sauna up, if you're doing it within a spiritual context, it's similar to you go to church and there's incense and the smoke is carrying your prayers up to heaven. Saunas and sweat lodges can also be used in a spiritual context. So for our spiritual health, in addition to our mental, physical, and emotional health. So I know you're all going to take some contrast showers later tonight. Let me know how you like it. And then here's the other side of that. I did not go all the way in. I just dipped my feet into the water, but I took a quick little video of what it was like. I was the only one there. I got the last time slot of the day. That's the restaurant. And then this is the kind of blocked off swimming area that they've made just with their dock. Lots of people came and just walked along the dock and enjoyed the evening. I was the only one crazy enough to actually put my feet in. And my dad wanted nothing to do with this. He was in the restaurant.
Temperature outside?
Outside, it was in the mid 40s. That water was cold. I mean, it's not frozen, but it was very cold. I would not have wanted to go all the way in, for sure. Let's see. So next, we only had that one full day in Copenhagen, and that's because I did have to get to Poland for a work trip. So next we went to Gdansk, and again, we made it right through security. We found this fun little sign, the journey is on. So all these great memories I get to share with my dad, and he's such a goof. He is 73, and what he did for every picture we were in is he made this little hand sign, and I don't know, you'll see it multiple times throughout, and it's like how some people always do a peace sign or whatnot. That was kind of my dad's little signature photo pose. One really neat thing about this, because we had purchased a premium ticket, my dad's very tall and he's never traveled international. So I wanted him to be very comfortable. I wanted him to sleep well. Plus I've traveled international a lot, and I just know how much of a difference it makes if it's possible, if it's available, to spend a little more money on the seats with extra legroom. And what we didn't know, this was a pleasant surprise, that ticket also qualified us to go to the lounge. We couldn't go to the lounge spaces in the United States. You have to pay even more money if you want to do that. But in Europe, our just mild little upgrade was enough to get us into the lounges, where I actually had my most favorite meal in the airport lounge in Copenhagen. And they had coffee and cheese and rolls and soup, all the things, sandwiches, salads, all the things. It was a wonderful experience for us. And then when we came out of the airport, we hopped on the train. The Polish train system was way harder than the Danish train system. But because many, many friendly Polish folks offered to help us, we finally made it to Old Town, which is where we were staying. And you can see on the left this big picture. Our hotel was literally across the street from that big church. That's St. Mary's Church. I didn't write down how many stairs it has, but I want to say like 300 or I have it. If I'm wrong, I'll amend myself at chair class tomorrow, but it was around 300 steps to the very top, and then you could see a panoramic view. We didn't do that part, but we did. You can see the bottom right there. That's King Neptune. We did find King Neptune's statue while we were in Gdansk. And then at the top there is a picture of the old town. And you might not see it entirely from that top one, but if you look at this bottom left picture, how those houses are tall and skinny and they're all a different color, doesn't that look a lot like Niehaven? Isn't that amazing? I love going to different places and just seeing how we're similar. So we got to enjoy some similar architecture, but just little changes in the way that their churches were bigger, their streets were a little wider. And here's another photo of the large church. This on the left here is called Milk Gate. When you go through that gate, you cross over the canal into a different part of town, a more industrial part of town. And then on the top right there, that is the canal that you would cross, and that big schooner there, that pirate-looking ship, that would take you to what's called Westerplatte. Westerplatte, there's a little bit of controversy historically. Some sites say that it's the first shots of World War II were fired there. Other sites say the shots weren't fired there, but the refusal of the Polish people in Gdansk to be taken over by German control, it was that resistance that sparked the first battle that started World War II. So depends where you look on the exact data there, but this was definitely a historical World War II spot, especially for Polish history. I did go there, but I'll tell you about it in a little bit. First, I'll tell you what we did on our second day. We went to the Baltic Sea. So Gdansk is in northern Poland. All the athletes were staying on the beach side of town, whereas all of the support staff that were working the event, we were staying in the old part of town. So we went up to the beach part of town. I got to do some interviews with athletes, which is good for me for my reporting and my broadcasting experience. But it was also lovely because, well, the beach is lovely. And we met with a few of the Polish skaters while we were there, and they took us for a walk up and down the beach, told us all about their training, how they're handling pressure, what their nutrition has been like this season. So we got to learn a lot just about modern day athlete life and what kind of things are different from my athletic days. So we stopped on our way back from this little walk. We stopped at a restaurant. We got our first somewhat traditional Polish meal. My dad is less adventurous with his food than I am, so he just went for a good old fish fry. I tried this. They're not quite pierogies, but they were kind of like a mix between, the menu said, a mix between a pierogi, a gnocchi, and a ravioli. Yes, it was all of those things, very delicious. And again, just wonderful to hear my dad rave about the quality of food and how much he enjoyed the food in Europe. So one of the days, I did wake up early with a couple of my coworkers, and we went to Westerplatte. So this is where the original barracks were, and you can tell now, especially on the inside, it's completely decrepit. There's a sign as you walk in, says unstable architecture, go in only at your own risk. And then the majority of other buildings on that site had been completely leveled down to the foundation, or maybe just a few bricks outlining where the first floor would have been. This was a very heavy part of the trip. I didn't realize when I was there how that would hit me, because this was a work day. So it really stuck with me even throughout my work day, the heaviness of this site, specifically because Hitler visited this site. And so it was very odd. I found, you go to museums, there's like plaques. There was a plaque that said, hey, this is where Hitler stood when he came there. And man, that really, that got me. That was very heavy. But that's why I went, because I wanted to feel that history for myself. When you get to the top, there is a memorial statue there. And then you can actually look out on the canal and the Baltic Sea from where that memorial is. And I thought this was very exciting. On the right hand there, that looks like a bright red rose at the end of November. And they were everywhere. And that, can you nod your head if that's unique? That was really unique. And again, that heaviness, that feeling, it just, to me, it felt like something is blooming in these flowers. Because this is not how flowers typically bloom. There's some energy here that seems to be, there were flowers and berries and bushes. Things were growing. They were alive. They were green. They were bright red. The berries were so ripe, I could just touch one and they'd fall off. And at the end of November, I thought that was so unique. And it felt to me like there was some bigger energy happening in that place that was too big for my little human brain to fully comprehend. But I'm so glad I went. We also found another memorial site where I got to stop and say some prayers and share some gratitude for all of the fallen soldiers, regardless of the country that they represented. When I was going to school I didn't finish my master's degree, but I took several classes in sports psychology. One of the books we had to read was called A Man's Search for Meaning. It was a psychotherapist who had been in a concentration camp, lost his whole family, lost his fiance, lost his grandma's engagement ring that he was, proposing to his fiance with. Like he lost everything, even to the point where he lost. He was a PhD student, and they took his thesis, and like his entire academic life of research was completely lost because of all the atrocities that went on during World War II. And the resounding sentiment from his book was that there's good ones and bad ones, and that there were people on both sides that were willing to help and share their strength of spirit, and there were people on both sides who seemed just hell-bent on hurting others. And being in this place and being with the people I was with, I think that's one of the reasons why it was so heavy for me, because even though this was, typically something we look back and think world wars are bad, we don't want that. It was a reminder for me, especially at this memorial place, to remember there were good people on both sides. And it was really a shame that our humanity had to go through that. Maybe we can say a quick little prayer at the end looks like we're kind of back in a tumultuous political situation at this point in time. And so why don't we do this quick? I do this sometimes in chair class. It's one of my favorite exercises. Can we all bring our palms up, please? So this is called the squeeze. And what we do, I had a high school teacher who would always have us like squeeze the bad guys in our life to kind of make us feel like we were stronger, we could handle it. And then one day he asked me if I had any bad guys, and I said, I do, but can you just picture me in your hands and squeeze all your good stuff into me rather than crush my bad guys? And this teacher said he's never done it the old way ever since. They've always, from that day on, squeezed positive energy. So maybe it's someone in your family who served or has been impacted by service, or someone you sure as heck hope doesn't have to serve one of these days soon. Let's close our eyes and just squeeze all our love and positive energy into those people. Maybe they're your person, maybe they're someone else's. Take a nice deep breath, and then let that go. Thank you for sharing that with me. I'll go back to our presentation now. So after this, like I said, I had to go to work. So this is where I was working at on that trip. This is called the Hala Olivia. So it was a big stadium, not just for ice skating events, but it multi-purpose, kind of like our Fiserv Forum here in Milwaukee. And I got to do some really fun things. I got reporter experience, which typically I only have broadcast, which is called analyst experience. But on this trip, I also got to get field reporting experience. So I spent about 10 minutes on the ice with Pietro Siegel. He is an Italian skater. He will very likely medal at the next Olympics. He's very, very talented. And what I learned about during this interview was he actually has a dad who is a world champion in long track speed skating, and his little sister is on the team with him for short track speed skating. And that's pretty common. A lot of speed skaters have some sort of family ties to the sport. On this other side of the screen, I'm hanging with an athlete from the Norwegian team. His name is Tinius. Tinius probably won't win a medal at the Olympics, but he was really fun to talk to. And he also had a family tie in the sport. He told me the reason, his best memory of skating and the reason that he got really into it as a kid was because when he was about 5 years old, I might not get all the details correct, but something along the lines of his dad took him to an outdoor ice rink and they skated a 10,000 meter, which is something that's quite popular in Europe, especially in Holland. The canals will freeze, and it is common to put on your skates and go all around town skating on the canals. So one of his first memories of skating was doing a 10,000 meter on the frozen canals with his grandpa. He said he only had to stop once for a hot dog and some hot chocolate. So that was fun to learn more about their families and their lives as athletes. This is what the commentating booth looks like. It's really not that shiny. On the right here is me and my coworker Gavin. On the left, that's our setup. So we each get a TV screen. So we can, even though we could just watch the race, we can see what you all are seeing at home on the TV screen. Gavin kept his laptop open to access all of his notes. And then kind of in the middle screen there, that's our timing system. So every athlete's lap time comes up one by one on the timing system. That helps us when we're announcing a race. And then the last thing, you can see it in the middle here, there's like some blue and white dots across the middle of your screen. That's our headsets. So our headsets connected us to a TV truck that was in the back of the building, also to our producer's office, who was based in London, as well as to each other. And this is the same way that I commentate when I'm working for NBC. I have a TV monitor, I have my own personal Wi-Fi router, and I have a headset. It's called a VIA kit. Put on your headset, you can talk to anyone across the world, across the country, different time zones with very minimal time lapse. So that's how we do the commentating, whether we're in person or remote. So there were some other things I got to see when I was there, just some little training things for you. So this guy's name is Thomas Natalini, and his coach, Nicola Radagari. So Nicola and we skated at the same time in 2010. And Thomas is doing what's called a power jump test. He's on a force plate. And so what the strength coaches on various teams will do is they'll do like once a week, you get on the plate, you do a big jump. The plate tracks how much time you spend in the air. So if 1 week you're up there for 5 seconds, but the next week you're only up for 4 seconds, that tells the coach, this athlete's tired. This athlete needs a break. But maybe next week you're up to 6 feet. This athlete's ready. Put him in the 500, let's go. So this is how coaches make a lot of their decisions about which athletes are ready to compete and what order they'll compete in based on the data that they get from testing. I got to be there while the Korean team was on their practice ice. So here in the middle, they're just practicing starts. Pretty common thing to do in the sport. And then I also wanted to show you all a video of that same team doing a relay. Relays are the most chaotic event in short track because you'll see as the inside skaters build up their speed on the inside, they're going to step out onto the track and receive a push from the pushing skaters. So if you watch anything during the Olympics, watch the relay. It is the most exciting event. And we do have a ladies relay competing in the Milan Cortina Olympics. We also have a mixed gender relay competing at the Milan Olympics. Our men's relay didn't qualify. It was very unexpected. They fell down in an early round, and then another team who just plain got lucky was either advanced or other teams fell down, whatever it was, they made it to the A final, got so many points that it kicked our guys out of the top 8. So that was a real shame to be there for that, because up until that point, the US had been qualified every step of the way, and it was the last race. They made a mistake and somebody else just did a way above average job and totally changed up the results. But we will have a ladies and a mixed gender relay. Some other things I wanted to share with you. This is what off-ice training looks like for speed skating. This tool here is called a corner belt. So it mimics how hard you lean around the track. But instead of leaning with skates on, you're holding a belt so you don't fall down. It wraps around your hip, and then you practice your technique with your shoes on. It's a way to activate your muscles to make sure you feel good when it's time to skate, but it's also a way to strengthen your muscles and to work on good technique. This is why I've had 3 hip surgeries. Promise. This is a very, very challenge. This is very hard on your body to do multiple repetitions of this. And then a few things that I think we can come back to. I set aside a few little videos of various athletes. I'm going to keep going through my slides just for time, and if we have a little time at the end, I'll go back and I'll show you some of these things. When we were in Gdansk, I think it's a very clever joke. I would go up to my coworkers and you can Gdansk if you want to. And a lot of people would dance with me, which you all know a big reason I do fitness drums is because music and dancing is well known to be the most effective form of treatment for depression. And even when you look at taking medicine or adding exercise, improving your social group or your spiritual life, all of these things help. The thing that will give you the biggest bang for your buck in the smallest time frame is dancing. So I tried to dance just as much as I possibly could during this trip. Even when we first arrived, I was like, Dad, we're in to dance, let's go. I danced the whole time and even would stand up and dance with these guys. These guys did the Macarena on every single ice break, and the entire stadium would get up and dance with them. It was so fun. The Polish organizing committee gave free tickets to all the local school children, and they packed the stands full of kids who would just dance and play games and keep it a really lively, fun event. So after the competition was finished, it was time to go to Stuttgart. And I'll tell you quickly, so my dad had never been to Europe, but decided that it would be fun for him to try some solo travel. While I was working, he really wanted me to stay focused on spending time with my coworkers and not have to worry about him. So he decided to take the train to Germany from Poland. The first day he went from Gdansk to Berlin. Only made it because of a friendly stranger who spoke English. The second day, Berlin to Stuttgart. Only made it because of a friendly stranger who spoke English. And then by the time he arrived in Stuttgart, he needed a day off. And I think that worked out really well for all of us because I needed to focus on work. He needed a quick day to himself. So he spent Saturday fully relaxing, recharging. On Sunday, he went out to see the Mercedes Museum. So my dad is really into cars, and that was his number one thing he wanted to do was see the Mercedes Museum. And then I flew to meet him after the races had finished, first thing Monday morning. So hopped on a plane to Germany. And the reason we chose Stuttgart is because it's where my ancestry is from. My dad has probably a good 10 or 12 generations of our family tree tracked. And our oldest relatives that we have information on are from Stuttgart. Specifically, a little farm town about an hour away called Scheppek. But we felt that being in Stuttgart was, plus the trains were very difficult. If the trains had been easier, we might have adventured to Scheppek, but we felt that being in Stuttgart was more than enough to enjoy our family history. So it was just a beautiful old town, lots of, how can I say this? It was like, you can go to the old east side of town, or the old north side of town, or the old west side of town, and they all just had something different and unique to offer. Up at the top here, that would be the Stuttgart's version of Palace Square. That's their parliamentary building behind that big water fountain. And then when we were there, that whole area was covered in little booths because the Christkindl market was just about to open up. So we missed out on that, but we did find an indoor market. If you've been to the Milwaukee Public Market downtown, it was a lot like that, but much, much bigger, much fresher. It was, fresh fruits and vegetables and then freshly made cheeses, and then freshly cured meats. And I guess cured meats aren't really fresh, but just the way to see how they weren't all wrapped in plastic, right? Like, I don't know quite how to describe it, but just that, again, this idea that in Europe, their food is just a little higher quality, or if nothing else, it's not the same packaging. It's more like wholesale, or you buy the entire summer sausage, not a plastic package of pre-slices. And they had olive bars and bakeries and chocolate places, and again, just all these things that my dad had never seen before, and in a really beautiful and unique place. And then the bottom right there, that's a part of town called Bad Cannstatt. I'm sure I'm not saying it right. Is Lori here? How do I, she's not, she can tell me how to say it. We'll ask Lori and I'll make an announcement at a chair class. Helga's here?
Bad Cannstatt.
Bad Cannstatt. Thank you. It's nice because I told the folks that I worked with, like, guys, I work in Germantown. I'm German. I'm going to Germany. I work in Germantown. So a lot of fun things kind of all came together, just perfect for me there, and lovely to share it with our residents here as well. There we go. One of the things that we did while we were there is we went to the TV tower. So we got to go all the way up. I don't quite remember how many feet it was, but we got a panoramic view of Stuttgart. And there was a restaurant there, and that was our first German meal, at least that we had together. It was delicious, but listen to what it was. A bed of lettuce. You know how you can spiralize zucchini into noodles? It was spiralized bologna and cheese with pickle relish on top. I have no idea what it was called, but we actually really enjoyed it. And we ordered like a big appetizer of black and green olives. Again, more things that my dad had never seen before, and how he would comment. My mom loved olives, but gosh, I don't think my dad eats olives as an adult, but sharing olives with me reminded him of all of these things from his family and his past. And we must have spent hours in that restaurant. Tell me about your grandpa, and tell me about your uncle, and this and that. And this is neither here nor there, but I said, what do you remember about your grandpa John? He said, he used to give me gum. And that was my dad's favorite memory of great grandpa John, was that he would come, my family owned a dairy farm, he'd come to the farm and give all the grandkids a stick of gum. So you just don't learn those types of things about people unless you really have time to sit, visit, and relax. And that was the best part of the trip. We really didn't buy much. I think we each bought one gift for my mom, and every other step of the way, my dad, do you want this? Do you want? I said, no, I'm getting 2 weeks with you. That's enough. So we didn't walk away with much other than a fantastic experience and some great memories. But I'm not done yet. I'll tell you a few more things. So Helga's going to have to help me out again.
Bad Cannstatt.
Bad Cannstatt.
Yeah.
Very good. So we spent time here. We found, this was the historic east side of town, if my memory is correct. We found a lovely church with a convent attached and an active group of sisters that were doing work in the community, and also a beautiful courtyard that had a courtyard that had a cemetery roped off. And so we took a walk through the cemetery. We didn't find any Reuters, which is my maiden name, but my dad grew up in a town called Cisna Park. It might as well have been called Germantown. Everyone where my dad grew up was from Germany. They were all apostolic Christians, which again is a heritage that if you know better than I do, let me know. But I'm under the impression that it's a very, like, that whole culture, not just the people, but their religion and their work and the way that they built their families. The entire culture came with them from this part of the world to the United States. So we saw in this cemetery lots of family names of people that my dad had grown up with. And I figured, even though these aren't my ancestors, they're people that I know. They're their ancestors. And that felt really just wholesome to get to be a part of that. But I did say a little prayer. I said, oh God, maybe one of these days we'll find something with the Reuter name on it. And I'll tell you how God answered my prayer. The next day, we went to the Porsche Museum. So you go up to the front, and there's, I don't know how clear it is from where you are, but these 3 Porsches, big statue, all growing up into the sky, as tall as the building is. We went inside. The building is the shape of a spiral. So you go through the smallest part of the spiral and you see the very first cars ever made by Ferdinand Porsche. And then you see how, I don't remember all the things he did, but he did several things that really catapulted the automotive industry forward. He made an electric battery, an electric car in the 1800s, which I thought was amazing. He figured some way that magnets can rotate the wheel for you without power, so he used magnets to power the wheels. And then he also invented a specific type of suspension. I think it's called rotary suspension, that he invented in the early 1900s, and that is still the type of suspension that we use in our automobiles today. So this guy did a great job really catapulting the industry. We went through the second round of the spiral, and we found out how Porsche materials and Porsche like warehouses were used to make goods that were used in the war. And then after the war, Ferdinand passed the business on to his son, who was also named Ferdinand, but I think they called him Ferry. So he passed the business on to his son, Ferry. Ferry moved the warehouse and like the production, the manufacturing, back to Stuttgart. It had been moved previously, and after the war, he moved it back to Stuttgart. And he partnered with the Reuter Automotive Group to make the first 500 commercial cars by Porsche. So God answered my prayer in a really big way. We don't know if those were our direct ancestors. Lori told me yes. She said, that's your name and your town, those are your ancestors. But whether they were we're direct descendants of them or not, we knew we had family that had worked for Porsche in the 50s, but we had no idea that Porsche had combined forces with the Reuter Automotive Group. And so we found our family name in 3 different exhibits and in the audio tour. That was super special. And that was only the second spiral. And so the rest of the spirals, I kept going back. I must have taken a picture of that spot 10 different times. But that was a true gift to find that with my dad and feel like we had all the ancestral heritage-based things that we wanted, along with all of the modern good food and fun things and entertaining museums. We got the best of both worlds. And then this race car here on the left side of your screen, oh gosh, darn it, number 33. Hold on, it's coming. Number 33, so 2 really fun things about that car model. One is that this is the model that the Reuter Automotive Group first made. So this happened in the late 1940s. I'm under the impression that a model would maybe be revised and improved over time, but not changed drastically. So that model lasted for, I don't know how many years, but a long time, just with these constant updates. This is the race car version of that model. This model is called the grandma of the Porsches because it raced for 4 years, which is, I suppose, a long time in car racing time. But that hit me really hard, guys, because my Olympic career lasted 4 years. That is a short career for an Olympian. Lots of Olympians go 8, 12, 16 years nowadays. They're professional athletes. There are athletes my age that are still competing in the Olympics in my sport. It was really meaningful to me that not only is this the car that had my family name on it, but this was a race car. And this race car had just about a similar career that I had as an athlete. So many reasons that was special for both of us. And then this was our last day of the trip, so we went out for a traditional German meal, and I thought the food in Germany was the best of anywhere we'd been on the trip. Poland had the best baked goods, the best bakery items, but in terms of meals, I thought Germany had the best food, and actually Poland also had really good sauerkraut. Better than German sauerkraut. It was fresher and more like pickled rather than canned and had like a softer texture to it. But ever since I got back, I've been telling people, in the United States, I eat sauerkraut because it's good for me, But in Europe, I ate sauerkraut because it was good. It was actually good over there. I really enjoyed it. They gave us this little cake with jelly as our dessert. And we also had homemade spätzle there, some regional wine. That part of town is known for its wine vineyards, I guess would be the right word. So really had an all-inclusive last day where we got to enjoy every little aspect of that part of the world. And then it was time to go home. Now, this is my dad. He's 73. I don't think that's a horribly heavy suitcase, but it's pretty heavy. Watch this. Sometimes he'd carry mine too, and mine was 50 pounds. So he must have done that a dozen times on the trip. I tried to take a video every time because of how incredible it was, but I'd stop to take a video and he'd go off. But he was so strong. He did such a good job. Like I said, even traveling alone, asking strangers, do you speak English? Can you help me? He would just, I like to think he got everything he wanted out of that trip, as did I. And I'm very grateful for y'all for being here and listening to me share all my stories. I think that's my last slide. So anybody have any questions? Yeah.
How many miles did you bike in Denmark?
So biking in Denmark, it wasn't that many total. I would say it was 10 miles total. We made it up to Kastellet. That's about probably about 2, but we stopped a lot. We did a lot of zigzagging. When we came back, we came straight back, but then the sauna was probably 3 miles in the other direction. Stop, sauna, food, all the things, and then back. So total, it was about 10 miles. But it was very leisurely. The hotel rented us bikes for not very much money. And what really impressed us about the bikes there is their bike locks. Their bike lock is built into the wheel around the tire, and you just have a little key. So you can lock your wheel so it won't turn, or unlock it so you can ride. And that is so much better than what we do here. You got to lug around your big thing and your extra key and all the stuff. So we were really impressed. Even though it was 10 miles, it was easy and really high quality equipment. Yeah. Any other questions?
How long were you actually working versus sightseeing?
So how long were we working versus sightseeing? Was I working? Yeah. So we got to Denmark on Saturday, stayed Sunday, flew Monday. Monday was just a travel day, getting oriented. It was really hard for us to find our Airbnb when we got to Poland. We asked all the locals, no one could find it. I finally found it because my dad looked up a Google image of the place, and there was a piece of graffiti on the side of the wall. And that's how I found the graffiti. I couldn't find the address, but I found the graffiti on the wall, and that's how I knew which house was ours. But that was very stressful. He was very stressed. We traded that off throughout our trip. Sometimes I was stressed and he figured it out, and sometimes he was stressed and I figured it out. So we got to Poland on Monday. Tuesday and Wednesday were 50-50, like morning at the rink, afternoon with dad, flip-flop. And then I worked Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Those are the same days that he went on his own to Germany. We got back together Monday, toured Monday, Tuesday, came home Wednesday. And then we had Thanksgiving on Thursday. So my mom and my husband were all prepared for us. We just got to come home and put the turkey in the oven and have a holiday. Yeah, so that was great. Yeah, Barb.
Are you going to be color commentating the Olympics?
I will be color commentating for the Olympics, yes. So unfortunately, that means I have to miss 2 more weeks of work. But fortunately, I'll come back and I'll tell you all about it. And it'll be a great presentation. Yeah, I won't actually be in Milan. NBC is doing a remote broadcast. This has only been a thing since COVID. It started in COVID for health and safety, but then they found out how much cheaper it is to broadcast remotely than in person. So a couple of sports will be live from Milan, but the majority of sports will be working from Connecticut, which is where NBC headquarters is at. Yeah. All right, any other questions? Okay, well, I'll tell you what, I brought y'all treats. I didn't want you to come just for the treats, so I didn't mention it. So, oh, thank you. So what I'll do, I'll set these out on the side and I'll tell you quick. So this is a Toblerone bar. This is Swiss chocolate. I bought it in Germany, but we were right there. Okay, we're only like an hour from the border. So these are dark chocolate with the brown. The gold is milk chocolate, and the white is white chocolate. So if you'll please grab one, just because I don't have a whole lot, but I did want to bring something to share. Thank you so much for being here, and I will chat with you all soon.